Welcome to the CP show. I'm your host, CP. Today's topic is called the people of color and minority word switchery. Shh. The people of color and minority word switchery. Shh. And let me first say I appreciate um, um, personnel that are listening to this show and future personnel listen to this show as well. And I ask you, please, if you think you might like to hear future shows coming up, and or when they come out, you like to hear more about them, please click on the subscribe button on that. I really appreciate that. Um, that people of color and minority word switchery uh, agenda or tactic is actually very brilliant on that scenario, right? Because most of the time it's really not even called out to ask the question, what does it actually mean to be a people of color or minority? What does a minority or what does a people of color and a minority person look like? What does a people of color and a minority look like? Are we talking about are we using the determination of those words present time? Are we talking about past? Which one is it? Because here's the thing about it that when we say people of color and you see, so you see somebody riding a train, you say, oh, that's a people of color. See somebody riding a bus, that's a people of color or in a minority, right? See somebody riding a taxi, you pass by, oh, that's a people of color, that's a minority, right? You at work or you at a business and you seeing people pass on by. You say, oh, that's a people of color, a minority. Well, you don't ask a person, hey, are you a people of color? Are you a minority? Right? You at a gym somewhere, right? Or you at a restaurant or, hey, you're a people of color minority? Of course, that's not even logical. But the unfortunate part is that just as the word, this is not the show for that, but just like the word, and I may do a show on that, but just like the word white supremacy, that word is a very genericality based word. And again, I don't want to get into it on this show, but that's a different type of situation on that, right? Because white supremacy is a very generic word, and in these days and time, it's used as a very cool word. Yeah, it's used as a very cool word. White supremacy, hey, white supremacy there, white supremacy there, white supremacy there. You want white supremacy? You want some white supremacy? How about you want some white supremacy? Right? Just like the people of color minority. Hey, who wants people of color? You want some people of color? You want some people of color? People of color here, people of color there, minority, minority. You know what? Minority, minority. Going once. But you see this nonsense of just saying people of color minority without no type of uh, contextual type situation with that, right? So it's just like thinking about when somebody says black on black crime, black on black crime, black on black crime. It's like people looking at their watch, black on black crime, right? And never going to who are you talking about? That's very generic saying black on black crime. So I like to utilize the word supremacy in replacing white supremacy, right? Because here's the thing about it again, it's like people of color and minority, right? It, they're very generic on that. And so I like to try to use the word supremacy because that's to me that incorporates a little bit more than just saying white supremacy because you can have a person from a different cultures that can practice themselves, white supremacy themselves, based upon the category or race within a predominant-based culture. So you got people that hide behind, okay, I like that. So you can have a person that hide behind white supremacy, right? You say, wait the heck minute. This person look like just like someone within a predominant-based culture, but they're like, hey, wait a minute now, I'm not, within America standpoint where my relatives or background, they were from this country, that country, but based upon the non-pigmentation, and even by, say, for instance, the name, you say, wait a minute now, but you look just like someone within somebody within the predominant culture within America. You say, okay, that's fine, but I'm not. But you say, yes, but you are relating to racial concepts, right? And so you got some people that hide in and hide out. You sound like some whack-a-moles a little bit. They pop in and pop out, right, when they want to. Right? Same thing with white supremacy, right? Which I don't like to even use. So you got people that pop in and pop out to my white supremacy, but at the same time, they still practice themselves white supremacy, pretend they're not. Same thing with people of color, right? And minority. You got people that pop in and pop out. Hey, look at me. People of color. I'm a minority. And many personnel that want to call themselves people of color, minority, playing that little game, that little heinous game. Many wasn't even in the country of America 200 or 300 years ago, wasn't even in this country. To put that in perspective, it is 2021, right? 200 years ago, right? 100 years ago would have been what? 1921? 100 years before that, 1821. That's 200 years, right? So how many cultures, ethnicities, etc., were here in America and say they had a little bit of melanation or some kind of situation with ethnicity? How many of them were there in this country in America call themselves people of color minority? That would basically stop a lot of personnel, because many personnel weren't even in the country in the country. But how many people utilize the word people of color minority? Right? How many personnel use that? And that's brilliant, but it's kind of still evil, right? Because see, the progenitors of what you call in America would call people of color would obviously be, well, not obviously, would be African ancestry, Native blacks. African ancestry, Native blacks. They would be the person, non-sellout version. I'm talking about them, right? Some of those sellouts can go jump into a volcano, right? They don't. It's like some of them hate themselves so bad to have the melanation of blackness that they can't stand themselves, thinking they can just say we're all human. Yeah, okay, okay. They can keep playing that stuff with somebody else. But this people of color game and minority switchery tactic is brilliant, right? Because I just gave you an example, say, 1821, 20 years ago, right? The three main cultures that were in America was what? Well, we under the racial category of white. Second major category, under a category of black. And the third category would have been what we call, what we've been told what Native Americans are. That would have been the only three major cultures in America. So please show where this thing called people of color and minority was going back 200 years ago, that was talking about personnel within a predominant-based culture. Please show where in historical history where people of color and minority was talking about what we were taught what Native Americans are. Please go ahead and show where they were calling what we call Native Americans people of color, minority. And that was based upon only them, which again is a different topic in itself. I don't want to go into that. Right? But it's a very interesting concept to call somebody people of color and minority. You say, what does that actually look like? What does actually people of color minority person really look like? So you sitting there at work, or you got a business, or you seeing people walk down the street, get on the train, get on the bus, right? Go out, just or you had a restaurant or what, fast food, very nice, 5 star, 4 star. You had a nice hotel, not no best, not necessarily good hotel, some great hotels. Uh, Motels, or yeah, swimming pool, right? Entertainment facilities, etc. He said, oh, that person's people of color, that person's a minority. That don't even sound logical, does it? But this is a game that people keep wanting to play, this people of color and minority type of game, right? Because again, uh, African ancestors, Native Black would have been the personnel that would have been the progenitors or the originators of being called people of color minorities. And now you got personnel from no Pacific culture or cultures, ethnicities that call themselves people of color and minority. And if we really want to utilize beyond common sense, right? Beyond logic, universal reality is what I call that. If we want to really do that part, right? The only person overall that could not utilize the word minority is under the classification of what we want to call white male, right? He said, "Well, wait a minute now." And see, and even with that, that's a genericality of just saying white male, right? Because again, you have different personnel that can come right on in and go back out based upon, say, you say white, but that person can fall within the category of white, but based upon that person's native country or countries, ethnicities, interculturalness. If they have, say, non-melanation, how many personnel can slide right in and right on out and say, whoop, and fall within the category of white within a racial category? But then at the same time, switch the game around and say, whoop, 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 whoop. I come from a minority, or no, I'm coming from minority status, or someone that comes from a certain country or countries, no Pacific, that has a little bit of melanation to themselves, and you say, "Well, wait a minute now, I'm people of color," and you look at back in their historical history and say, "Man, y'all have never called each other people of color, let alone minority." As far as in a concept of racial concepts, that's not even really talked about. But quite a number of people arrive within the country, have a little bit of melanation, and say, "I'm people of color." Right? Didn't have to go through what I call black pain. Didn't have to experience black pain. Right? It's like this thing with Juneteenth. Now again, that's not part of the topic, but if I may just do a side things on that, since that just recently happened with the Juneteenth thing, right? How many personnel didn't want to hear anything about Juneteenth at all? How many people would even taught this in colleges, right? Kindergarten to 12th grade, weren't even taught these things. How many cultures and ethnicities arrived over here 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Never really even heard of that. Now it's the end thing now with Juneteenth now. Now that kind of stuff is going to be commercialized, and African ancestors, Native Blacks. I'm not talking about the sellouts or the ones that just get paid off. The overall amount of African ancestors, Native Blacks won't even benefit off that. They won't even benefit off that. Let alone they won't benefit off of being people calling other people of color minority. So it's kind of an interesting. It's very interesting concept to call people of color and minority, but at the same time, people don't want to call. Say, wait. He said, wait a minute now. Wait a minute now. He said, wait a minute. He said, wait here. He said, if you really think about this beyond logic again, the only again person overall in this system that cannot utilize the word minority again would be called a white male. And again, that is determined also by the Americanism of that person's name, or also where they was born. That's the kind of determination, because again, you got personnel with different kind of names, that different kind of parts and certain names to that that wouldn't sound necessarily Americanized, the Americanism version of what we consider a white male. But that person can slide in and slide out based upon this category saying white. It's a very brilliant game because here's the thing about it. You had just not too long ago where there was a company or companies that was relaying that they were going to commit $10 billion over the next decade for basically racial equality, right? Right? And more economics opportunity for black women. Well, are not black women considered minorities, right? Are black women considered minorities? But when you say, wait a minute now, what about black males? Are they not minorities? They didn't get billions of dollars, right? But here's a weird part about it, right? You hear within the predominant based culture, you hear numbers of women again, just like anything else. You have good numbers of personnel and not so good numbers of personnel, right? So okay, I'm just getting that part the way because you got people got a little finickiness a little bit, right? They don't have a problem talking about black, crime, black, crime. But you mentioned this person's culture, and they ethnicity, etc., and they jump all up and down a little bit, right? You say, wait a minute, if that does not apply to you, then get over your own self. So I say that because, isn't it now also for people who know, well, people who don't know, and some people who do know, well, on the classification of white relating to Caucasianistic women. Overall, I'm utilizing very genericalities because that's what the race is, very genericalities. Are not what we call Caucasian women. They're considered minorities. Think about that for people who don't know. Considered minorities. Where in history that what we call numbers of Caucasian women were just continuously generationally oppressed, right? And who oppressed them? Who oppressed them? When you see movies like Gone with the Wind, with the great Hattie McDaniels, right? And the Mammy situations and the other type of personnel around her and the butlers and stuff like that, right? Those black folks were would have been called people of color and also have been called minorities. So how is it that you had the personnel own these plantations and things like that, and black folks that are doing maids and butlers and all that kind of stuff? How is it that and this woman and in Gone with the Wind, how is it who is oppressing her? Not her personally, that's a character, but I'm saying that's not as it's not as if that stuff wasn't reality. So please go ahead and show me which women were on plantations for generations, right? Being grabbed up and assaulted and, all those other words and stuff like that I'm not going to use, right? Made to sit there and forced to, make babies and stuff like that to be on plantations, right? Cooking the food in the plantations, right? Sitting in the cotton fields, sun up to sundown, free of charge, not getting paid any kind of money. Can be showcased anytime, put on the auction block, sold when at the whim of the plantation person. And it wasn't just numbers of what we call Caucasian males, person within the predominant culture. See, that's that nonsense that people need to get over and stop trying to play this little game, but they're not. And that needs to be checkmated when they do that because the same type of person, numbers of Caucasian females were on the plantation as well, were they not? Right next to what we call numbers of Caucasian males enjoying the fruits of Black Pain's labor. But now you're talking about several generations later. Now you got people talking about Caucasian females now are considered minorities. You see the word switcher with that kind of nonsense? Just like people of color. How many cultures and cultures, right, popped over here, right? They have a little bit of melanation to their outside skin texture and will be considered people of color. Right? Didn't have to go through black pain. We're not put on plantations for generations. We're not grabbed up, right, from the ancient continent of Africa or the Kabbalah, one of the names for it, right? They have to go through the black pain. This is their remove their culture. They remove their languages and things like that. And then for the African ancestors, Native blacks that are already in existence here before the conquerors arrive, right? And then then the conquerors put Native blacks, and the African ancestry people, just put them all in one little jar, right? And just just negate it in general, and it's just in general call people black, but they still would have been called people of color, right? So I'm sitting there relaying to you. Isn't it interesting that you got people that have a little bit of deep melanation themselves, but in their own countries wouldn't even think about calling themselves people of color because they go by their own tribes. They go by their own provinces. They go by their own ethnicity. They go by their own languages. And they make the only thing, well, besides those things, those sharing part, is they share a province with each other, right? Oh, you from the Chapai province. Well, I'm from the Kachamine province, right? But you still look the same. You got a little bit of deep melanation, right? But it says, so what? We're not the same people. And how many people have a little deep melanation from certain type of countries that can't even marry to one another, even though their outside appearance will be called people of color in this country. So it's a very interesting concept on that, right? So it's just like uh it, it's like on Hidden Figures, the good movie Hidden Figures, right? Showing these strong African ancestors, Native Black women, right? And that type of rocket program and things like that, and contributing immensely to the rocket program, right? Generations ago, right? They'd have been called people of color, right? A minority. And when you see Hidden Figures and you say, wait a minute, did you sit there and see African ancestors, Native Black women being treated the same as numbers of what we call Caucasian females? Of course not. Of course not. Right? Of course not. People seeing the movie Harriet, you seen Harriet. Did you sit there and see numbers of Caucasian women being called minorities and being oppressed? Of course not. So you see the nonsensical game that's being played even more. And unfortunately, numbers of African ancestors, Native Black women, the ones that are not seeing it, they're not seeing it. Quite a number of them and being used, right? And just hearing that nonsense of just saying women without having some type of without just sitting there saying, wait a minute now, when you say women, which women are you talking about? Because again, you can have minority women, right? You can have people of color women. But see, numbers of African ancestors, Native Black women have allowed themselves to be swindled. Not talking about the ones that know the game, but that's a very few amount of percentage. And supremacists knows this. So you got numbers of African ancestors, Native Black women walking around talking about, they're feminists or under what I would like to call toxic feminism supremacy. That's a different topic. But so it's just an interesting situation on this, right? There was a documentary around 1980s relating to, I think it was called like Vanishing Family Crisis in Black America, right? And so it was an interesting documentary, right? And it was showcasing, as usual, in some kind of negative fashion about these numbers of black females and had kids and all that kind of kids, and people asking questions, how many of you are married or basically want to be with your baby daddies and stuff like that. And you really didn't hear anybody really raise a hand up. I think it was like one or so, right? But it was just interesting how it was just showing just the destructionality of showing numbers of black females, right? Just looking just down, and showing numbers of black males just looking like destructive, right? Helpless looking. Well, that's those women, those males, black males and black women have been people of color, minorities, right? I don't think they sit there and show what we call Caucasian females as minorities and people of color and oppressed, right? So it's an interesting concept on that. It's called Vanishing Family Crisis in Black America, right? It's like this thing with the greatness of what from the great Dr. Amos Wilson. For some people who know him, some people don't. He wrote a book called "The Black on Black Violence: The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination." It's a very interesting part, especially the whole book. But there's a book, not a but nothing. There's a part called "Black Male as a Potential Rebel." It's a very interesting part of that book as well. on that. So it's like one of those things going back to people of color and minority switchery, right? When people talk about crime, who are they talking about overall? When you think about first thing you think about is people of color, right? Uh, do you think about some other personnel besides black overall? Of course not. Most people, when they think about people of color, they think about black overall. When you think about minority overall, historical concepts, people think about black, African ancestors, Native black males and women. But a lot of people fly or slide under the people of color banner, minority banner, and get to have whatever resources and freebies and stuff like that, utilizing people of color, and minority switchery tactic. And however many of them can't even stand black folks themselves. They can't even stand them, but they utilize people of color minority. Right? When you see laws and policies being passed, and hatred of this culture, that culture. Oh, we got to pass a law for that, policy for that. Oh, you got a alternative lifestyle category, right? They're the minorities because they don't make up, I think a couple of percentage points. I'm just giving an example, but people would call some of them minorities too. See, you got people all over different places just utilizing African ancestors, Native blacks, just like pawns, right? But I want to bring that up because when you think about people of color minority, right? Let me just read you something about the black on black crime from the crime reporting program, where they talk about 57.6% of the victims were targeted because of the offenders' bias against race, ethnicity, and ancestry. Let me repeat this: 57.6% of the victims were targeted because of the offenders' bias against race, ethnicity, and ancestry. That was 57.6%. Right? Bias against race, ethnicity, and ancestry. Okay? And so how they talked about now remember I said 57.6% based upon race, ethnicity, and ancestry. And the next one was 20.1% were victimized because of the bias against religion. Right? But the thing about it, it was like among the single bias hate crime incidents in 2019, right, relating to the victims of race, ethnicity, and ancestry that was motivated by hate crime, 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by the offender's anti-black or African American bias. So around 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by the offender's anti-black or African American bias. See, again, that's really not talked about enough. I don't go off that sum. I don't go off that sum stuff. Sum is not good enough to me. So even just that statistic, but at the same time, you got people talking about people of color minorities and things like that. Oh, they get oppressed. Oh, those are minorities and people of color. Oh, we're people of color. We're minorities. We need protection by laws and policies. But still, how many people don't see a freaking hot dog tail about African ancestors, Native blacks, right? Making up the overallness of 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by the offenders anti-black or African American bias. But that's a shh on that. But how many people that slide under people of color minority do not say a dang thing of a darn hamster's tail or a hamster's tail about that? But they sit there and enjoy the freedoms of having to slide under people of color minority. It's a very interesting thing on that. So I just kind of want to go over that for a little bit on that. I didn't want to make this too much of a long show, today's topic on that. But it's just an interesting thing on this people of color minority switchery game because this is not really called out, especially by numbers of African ancestors, Native blacks. I'm not talking about some. See, supremacy, what I like to call is the most brilliant mental manipulation force that has ever existed. They're so brilliant. You got a lot of people don't even know they're existing, that they exist, right? And you got people that are going to play and play and play they're going to play that people of color minority game switchery tacked against more and more African ancestors, Native blacks. And more African ancestors, Native blacks are going to feel the power of other different cultures' supremacy. They are going to feel that even more because the, as I went over before, the three main cultures only a few hundred years ago was again what we call white category, black, and what we call Native Americans. Those are only three major cultures. And look at the destructionality of devilish treatment of anti-blackness that was being put upon African ancestors blacks then. And still 200 something years, still now, 1821, you still got African ancestry, native blacks. I'm not talking about sellouts. Sellouts can go somewhere because they ain't about nothing, right? They don't know they being sold out. And some of them hate themselves so bad for having melanation skin. But how many other personnel from different cultures have melanation skin and look at themselves as hatred at overall? Because there are some ones that, doing that bleaching their skin. But I'm saying we'll use the word people of color minority real fast to get whatever resources for themselves when they want to be considered people of color minority, right? All that I'm getting at now is that it's interesting how the still obviously main category of race is white, right? Second category now is what Hispanics. Third category now is Africa is Black Americans. So they fell to the third largest population and still get no reparations, get no laws or policies specifically for them to sit there and help out with economic depravity, right? Financial depravity, historical depravity, right? Still get nothing from that. But you'll have personnel that'll sit there and help people break immigration laws all over the place every darn day and give people free resources. And some of them have a little, some what do you call it? Some pigmentation, and some people play the game of people of color. Are they minorities as well? It's a disgusting game, but it's a brilliant game. So hopefully more African ancestors, Native blacks will wake up overall, which numbers will not, because again, I will say this and I will stand by what I say on this. The African ancestors, Native blacks only have about half a generation to one generation left for before the overall complete destructionality of what is black culture. You see reveling about how many businesses, see reveling about somebody's black folks' education level in half a generation, one generation. The only reason that certain political personnel even talk to numbers of African estimated blacks is because they know not one particular black man or black woman is not illegal, right? Or don't have to concern themselves about immigration situations. And that's one of some of the only reasons that in various political personnel even listen. They don't care nothing about it. They just want that vote. But they understand half a generation, one generation, they understand themselves. And that's why they have to make sure that that border is critically at crisis levels, right? And then somewhere down the road, when they decide to go ahead and put that pen in action and then make various types of legal immigrants, personnel that have broken immigration laws and laughing at taxpayers' money and getting whatever buses or planes, whatever they can send them off to different family members while they sit there laughing, right? But how many can fly under the people of color banner, minority banner, laughing? But African ancestors, Native blacks can't break immigration laws in another country or countries. You see the game? So I hope that this was interesting. And if you would like to, again, to hear more commentary on future shows coming up, please click on the subscribe button. I really appreciate you taking time to listen to this show. Thank you.